The mining sector hasn't had this much tailwind in a long time. So what's the state of juniors? Kai Hoffmann is CEO of Soar Financial. Kai, welcome back to Kitco.
Michael, thanks for having me again. Good to see you.
Talking about those tailwinds last week, BHP launched what could be one of the biggest mining deals in decades. That was last week. This year, gold has hit several all-time highs and copper is up 20%. These are really good times, Kai.
They should be. Right, and they are. It feels good. Depends on how you're invested in the markets, and I'm coming from the junior mining angle, and it is still not as rosy as one might expect. The markets, gold price is what it is. Copper prices are doing well. The stocks are slowly catching up to what is happening, but they're still trailing. GDX, GDXJ are still on a 12-month basis. We're still down. We're only a couple percent, don't get me wrong, but you would think with a gold price move this violent and a copper price that is recovering as nicely as it has, that we should be trading much higher. If you would have bought it right after PDAC or at PDAC and not fallen for the PDAC curse this year, you would be doing great. But quite honestly, a lot of people I've spoken with, investors, they've been positioned for 12 months for this breakout, don't get me wrong. So they're barely breaking even. Maybe they're in the money by 10%, but nothing euphoric. No euphoria in the markets yet. Still the generalists missing, and we see that in the financing numbers as well.
Let's now, we talked to you last in January, and that was at VRIC. And then you had interesting numbers that came out of Oreninc, and then just looking at financings. You're telling us that 2023 really wasn't as bad as people thought it was. I mean, it was still a rough year for everybody. But what you did notice at the time is that the market was very bifurcated. There were the winners, and then there was the losers as well. What have you seen carry forward into 2024, again, with these good metal prices?
It is still a very similar picture as we've seen in January or at the end of last year. The better deals, the larger or the further advanced deals, they're sucking in the capital, while the juniors or the grassroots explorers are still struggling. There's more money available now. Pockets might be a little looser, and pocket change might be a little looser, but it's still far from it. We've seen bigger financings. The $23 million Rio 2 has raised. Opera Silver is raising $20 million. So there is money, but always for later stage development projects, potentially better quality management teams as well. Doesn't matter if it's gold or copper. And copper, of course, last year has been taking quite a bit of bread or butter off the gold's bread here in the first half of the year, which is sort of dissipated in H2, second half of the year, due to the recession fears. Those seem to be rescinding. The U.S. is doing really well. Copper price is recovering. So some of that money is flowing back into copper stocks. You mentioned the BHP and Anglo transaction. That is additional tailwind, to quote you, Michael, there. And for the copper stocks, because it also adds copper price, and it shows, maybe it highlights the scarcity of supply in the copper space, which should be a potential catalyst. We're not seeing it in the stocks just yet. It is coming. I think that transaction, if it goes through, will be a massive spotlight on the copper market. And I think that's why copper also jumped from like 430 to 460 just in the last couple of days, maybe with accelerating momentum.
You mentioned the financing with Rio 2, Alex Black's Phoenix Gold project for $23 million. Is there any other? Is there any themes that are coming out of the financings that have happened in 2024? And I mean, of course, we just touched on already the battle between the critical minerals theme and then also the gold theme. I think if anything that I'm taking away from 2024, not looking at the financings, but just looking at kind of how gold has really kind of bounced back as a major theme right now. But again, anything that you see a particular highlights regarding if one is favored over the other?
I think we're trending back to gold. Obviously, gold has always been the number one attractor of capital, but it has dropped. And uranium has picked up the slack there. Uranium was big competition, especially the first 3 months of this year. We've raised close to $180 million in the uranium space in the first 3 months. Gold was lagging behind. Gold only dropped about 45% of the overall dollar mix, and that has increased again with the rally starting in March. So we are seeing more gold and silver backed financings. That is a clear trend that we're witnessing. Rio 2 is the perfect example, but it's all later stage projects. It is not early stage. Yes, there are a few companies that have been able to raise $500,000, maybe $1 million, but personally, I think there's not a lot of value being created. It continues to keep the lights on. Maybe a bit of geophysics in those stocks, but nothing earth shattering yet. So we keep looking at the later stage developers, maybe junior producers.
We're going into a big Fed week, but I think probably what we are seeing is that inflation has been a little bit hot, and then you're going to be looking at some of these interest rate cuts that the markets were anticipating are actually going to be deferred out through the year. China is still looking like a question mark. Kai, what are some macro trends that you're going to be paying attention to for the rest of 2024?
It is a very interesting weekend. I think the Fed, as always, is the central argument, but point of discussion. It is super important. And the market has priced out Fed cuts. Like maybe the first Fed rate cut might be in December now, which would be after the US elections. So, of course, I'm watching the US elections. Being European, it is still massively important to us here as well. And then there's the race, and maybe who moves first? Is it Lagarde or is it Jerome Powell? It has to do with currencies, who's becoming more attractive with lower interest rates. Where can we attract more capital to? So those are the trends. But what is interesting, gold doesn't care right now, and the commodities. They're running despite headwinds from the macro side, meaning the economies. Bond yields are at 4.6%. Gold is still going up. And the 10-year bond yield at 4.6% is attractive. Depending on the inflation number you want to believe, is it the real inflation number? Is it the shadow stats number, or your felt inflation? You're still not making any returns, or very little returns on that bond. But it is yielding 4.6%, which is still a very attractive yield overall. And gold has been competing with that. It has been doing better than the bond yields, and it's holding up against a fairly decently strong dollar as well. So those are trends I'm watching. Anything that could impact that balance and maybe add some more fuel to the gold rocket ship here. I don't want to get too euphoric with my language. You got to be careful because, that is stuff. Those are things I'm watching. Macro trends I'm watching very, very closely.
I want to get your thoughts on gold and macro and why it's going higher. You've been talking to a number of the gold people that I see that have been interviewed. Everybody was always talking about the debt theme that we see, worries that the U.S. is going to be able to actually sustain this debt that it's taking on. There's other people that are talking about central bank buying. There's a geopolitical risk above. There could also be years and years of supply destruction as well, just given how difficult it actually has been for these exploration and green shoots to actually get some type of financing. What's the major themes? What's the major drivers that you see for the gold price, or is it all of the above, Kai?
That's again, Michael. That's a very good question because it is tough to answer. I don't think it is a single trigger because I've been interviewing guests on our YouTube channel for the last 3 years, and they've all been somewhat predicting the same. The question is now timing. Like, why is it happening now? And the only answer I have for you is it's just a perfect storm of geopolitics and macro factors that just happened at the same time. Sadly, and the market just woke up to it. If you look at ETF fund flows, the US has woken up. We've seen, like the World Gold Council reported ETF fund flows for March. We've seen some inflows in the US and in Asia, massive outflows in Europe, which made the whole ETF calculation negative. But the main markets, Europe and Asia, have been actually investing in gold. So that came to the central bank buying. We've seen geopolitical crisis, Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia is still going. So that is pulling gold higher. And finally, people woke up to it. And there has been positive buying and technical as well. So maybe it's three factors: geopolitical, macro, plus technical. Because we've bounced off $2,000 or $2,100 like 3 times. And talking to macro or technical specialists, I'm not a technical analyst, by the way, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. But the technical analysts said they've never seen a triple top in any chart. And the 4th time gold broke out. It was extremely violent, but I think that was then fueled by the macro and by the geopolitical events. And the Gold Council put out a graph or a table with bar charts, and most of the move in gold for them is also unexplained, which is interesting. Part of it was risk, part of it was momentum, but the biggest bar was unexplained.
Now, we tried to do this interview last week, Kai, when you were doing my project visit in Arizona. Why were you in Arizona, and what were you visiting?
Yeah, I pulled off on the side of the road and because I couldn't make it to my hotel in time, and I apologize again for that. But it would have been really interesting to do it. And Arizona is copper country. There's a lot of mines, a lot of interesting projects that we've all heard about. And I was visiting 2 projects that will also be attending Deutsche Goldmesse because it speaks a bit to our hands-on approach at Deutsche Goldmesse. Most of the companies that are presenting, I've either broken bread with, shared a beer with. It's mining after all, or we've been to the project, so we know them usually really, really well, and that is part of the maybe USP of Deutsche Goldmesse. So we like to look closely so we don't get scammed. It has happened, we have fallen for some tricks in the past. Nothing beats a hands-on approach, talking to the geologists, talking to the CEO, looking them in the eyes, and to talk about the project and their plans. How they're planning to spend my money, how are they planning to spend your money, and what is the message they're trying to sort of transmit there.
You are hosting Deutsche Goldmesse that's going to be kicking off later this week in Frankfurt. Who's attending and what's on deck, Kai?
Yeah, it's like we've always been a small boutique event. Germany is a very interesting market. It's a unique market. We have 20 companies coming out, but we have 200 investors registered for the event. And that's a 1 to 10 investor company ratio, which is phenomenal. And I don't think there are many other conferences that compete with that ratio, which I'm really proud of. And they're not just from Frankfurt. They're investors from Scandinavia, from the Netherlands, from Belgium. We have a very strong focus also on the Twitter or X community. They're quite vocal when it comes to mining stocks. We're really proud to have them join us in Frankfurt. And we have 6 fantastic keynote speakers. We have Brien Lundin join us, Jeff Clarke, Lobo Tiggre, Joanna Ponica, a rising star that everybody should follow. We have Eric Strand from AG Funds out of Stockholm joining us, and a good friend of mine, Markus Bussler of the Aktionär, one of Germany's largest financial magazine, and he's their commodities and mining stock reporter. Really looking forward to that. And on top of it, we have Equinox Gold, Fireweed Metals, Arizona Metals, just to name a couple. I don't want to list all 20 companies here, but I'm quite proud of the lineup and the roster, and I can't wait. It's going to be 2 busy days. I'll probably be losing a bit of weight over the 2 days, but it's going to be worth it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be worth it for the investors.
Kai, thanks for speaking with us.
Michael, thanks for having me. Always great. Always a pleasure.
My name is Michael McRae. You're watching Kitco Mining.